Right now, Obama pushing his gun agenda in D.C., but how is it being received across the country? We're going to talk to one area lawmaker who's been very outspoken about his opposition to New York's new gun laws. And later, you will hear from Chris Christie in a way you may never have heard from him before, talking about his personal life and his encounter with one George Clooney. Good evening and welcome to RFL. I'm Richard French, and thanks so much for joining us this Thursday evening, January 17th. Tonight, we are going to be bringing in the panel shortly, and we'll talk about politics and the bizarre Teo hoax here at Notre Dame. But first, I'm very pleased to be joined here by State Senator Greg Ball from the great state of New York, who's been in the news, as many of you know, here lately over the subject of guns, both his vote this week in Albany and his vocal opposition to the Journal News. Now, we're going to get to that in the upcoming segment. But first, Greg and I, we're going to talk about guns in America post Newtown. Greg, welcome very much. Thanks for joining us.
Happy New Year.
It seems, and a lot of the headlines of the papers are, the NRA versus President Obama. Overly simplistic possibility, but it is, and the framing goes, two very clearly different ideas about guns, their limits, and what we ought to do, as I said, in a post-Newtown America. Now, the NRA named you twice as Lawmaker of the Year, and safe to say, you're a proud member here, and obviously they look very favorably at you. But I want to look at the favorability rating of the NRA today compared to literally just over a month ago. Take a look at this. It's pretty staggering. They were at approval ratings, as they almost always are, over 50%, in fact 54% towards the end of December, and today they stand at 36%, and the unfavorables correspondingly have jumped up. And those that were solidly in one corner or the other, now you got 1 in 5 Americans who's sitting on the fence. Have you had any second thoughts about the National Rifle Association?
I'll tell you, I'm pretty strong on the Second Amendment and rock solid, and I don't give crap about polls.
Okay. Well, let me ask you.
I care about doing the right thing.
My
polling hasn't always been that good either at times.
All right, but there is a. See, I believe on this issue. And I might surprise some folks, I've also taken issue with the Journal News. We're going to talk about that in the next segment. But there's the message and there's the messaging. And I thought when there was a week gap between the shooting and Wayne LaPierre coming out, that we were going to hear a much different both message and tone. And clearly you said no restrictions other than what's in the books right now, and in fact, more guns. Good. The only thing that'll stop a bad guy with a gun is a good guy with a gun. Let's take a look at a couple things they have. One is the ad that's running now that's got a lot of attention. For our viewers who haven't seen it, let's take a look.
Are the president's kids more important than yours? Then why is he skeptical about putting armed security in our schools when his kids are protected by armed guards at their school? Mr. Obama demands the wealthy pay their fair share of taxes, but he's just another elitist hypocrite when it comes to a fair share of security. Protection for their kids and gun-free zones for ours.
I think that if the NRA did more commercials like that, their approval ratings would be better. I don't have a problem with that commercial. I think it's a good point. I know that we're probably
elitist because every president's kids shouldn't get safe Secret Service.
No, that's not what they're saying. What they're saying is
that he's an elitist because his kids have Secret Service.
You can take it, but from my perspective, we have a president and we have a governor, but now we have a president who's going after a gun grab and saying that we will be more safe as long as law-abiding people aren't able to have firearms, yet he's surrounded and his family's surrounded with great protection. It's just like this whole magazine thing.
Is it in the national interest to not have Secret Service for the president's kids?
No, that's not the point. That's not the
nobody exactly the point.
Nobody begrudge him.
It sure as heck sounded like that ad did.
Nobody's begrudging him his security or his family his security, but let us protect our families as well, and that's the point of that commercial.
Then
I think
tell me about this. Now, this one to me boggles the mind even more than the ad, and anybody who's seen the dailies this week certainly knows where I'm about to go. This is an app that the NRA put out post-Newtown. Now, in the app that's designed, and again, I'm reading verbatim from them, for children 4 years and up, they have an M16, and they have targets that, if you make it out over there, are white coffins. The NRA has stood by this. I ask you, please, I'm begging you, tell me that nobody in their right mind thinks it's a good idea post Newtown, where you have 26-year-old kids that were so riddled with bullets, some were unrecognizable, to get a gun that resembles very closely the AR-15 that was used, and to create the white caskets like the tiny little ones that they were buried in, that is the NRA that you signed up for.
I mean, look, as far as defending any particular judgment of a video game that's on a website, when I look at that, and you're saying that they're caskets.
They're caskets. They say they're caskets too.
You know, that's what they are. It's definitely a poor judgment. So.
Okay.
But you know, the larger issue is that we have our Second Amendment, and we have atrocities that are occurring in this country, and we have a mental health system that's a kangaroo system where violently mentally ill people are falling through the cracks, and we're not having a discussion about that. We're talking about video games.
From the press conference I listened to from the president yesterday, mental health, violent video games are both on the table. But what he did lay out was, among other things, 4 pretty concrete things. Now, whether they can get through the House or not, that's a different debate. But I want to get your perspective, and I'll give you the public's perspective on each one here. And let's go through them each individually if we can. And the first one here is the assault weapon ban here. Where do you stand on the idea that we can limit some firearms? And I understand we're going to be talking about modifications and everything else, but you're a pretty straight shooter. You know it when you see it. Can we have an assault weapons ban in this country without restricting the Second Amendment? Do we need to have AR-15s in the hands of the public?
We have an assault weapons ban in the state of New York. We've had an assault weapons ban. The question is the expansion beyond where it is now and what you define within those parameters. And we've seen it in New York. I mean, honestly, Richard, if you look at the substance of the bill that just passed in the state of New York, as somebody who supports gun control from your perspective, I think that you'd be pretty upset because a lot of it's cosmetic. A lot of it is about getting on the front page of the papers and Governor Cuomo being able to say, you know what, these are the toughest laws in the nation. What we saw happen in California is that once there was a restriction put in place, a pretty intense restriction, the manufacturers went out and created 2 different models, and sales went through the roof.
Okay, so but one of the things that we'll talk about in New York, though, is if you do things in isolation, state by state, everybody acknowledges there's not magic bubbles around the state borders here. You have to have something, and that's where the president went yesterday for a national program.
We have to go after the illegal firearms.
But do me a favor. What I'd like to do is, I'd like to go through the big core elements and see where you stand on them, and then I think we'd agree here if the standard is there is no law that's going to stop all gun violence in this country. That much I know we can agree on. But if we can save a life and if we can make things at all reduce gun violence, it's probably something that we would all sign up for. And I'll go through, I did the assault weapons ban where 3 in 5 Americans support. The next one is the ammo magazine restriction. And again, we heard from the president, they want to reduce it to 10. New York, as you know, it's 7. And when asked about this, reducing those high-capacity ammo magazines, 2 out of 3 Americans get behind it. Are you with the 2 or are you with the 1?
They, no doubt, many of them do, and they may feel that that's a common sense measure, but the reality is that the only people right now in the state of New York, what we passed, we had a 10 limit, now it's down to 7. There aren't even any magazines that carry 7. So you're asking law-abiding citizens in their own home, like that woman down in Georgia. I think she shot that man 6 times who came in her house to kill her and her kids. If she had put 7 or 8 rounds under New York state law, she'd be the criminal. So people who are good people that are obeying the law, they're going to continue to obey the law. To think that criminals are going to obey this law and only put 7 bullets in their magazine is sheer lunacy.
Your position, forget that it's against the public. The public opinion on this, at least in the majority, it's also against what the cops have said. We reached out today to both the Fraternal Order of Police and the International Police Office Association, and they said, for us, it's the spree killings. For us, it's being outgunned by the bad guys on the streets.
I don't know what cops you're talking to, because the cops
international law enforcement. You can't find bigger groups than these 2.
Well, there's a lot of politics as far as at the highest levels, but the rank and file people, Richard, are calling me. I had a cop call me today under this law. A lot of them have they have firearms that take 17 rounds, and now under this current law, these cops are breaking the law literally as they leave work. They break. Yes. You may roll your eyes. This is the damn legislation. This is the fact. Under Cuomo's bill, these cops
But
are
you
currently
understand we're now talking about
turned into criminals.
that you can't in any way say that we can't even have a conversation on the national level that you're going to restrict a magazine to 10 bullets.
Well, tell me this. I mean, the reason why we're having this conversation, they talk about the tragedy in Connecticut. I mean, good people can come together and say, we will do whatever we possibly can to avoid tragedies like this.
Let me give you an easy one.
But
how about armor-piercing bullets? Can you make a compelling argument that that should be eligible for the general public to buy?
If we can get back to the other point.
No, just a simple one. I'm trying to find some
How
common
is a
ground.
restriction on the magazines going to prevent an atrocity like what happened in Connecticut?
Well, I'll go by what the cops say. The cops say if somebody's got to have a clip here that's 10 bullets or less, the amount of damage they can do is a lot less substantial than if they have a clip that's got 30 bullets, they can unload it in less than 2 or 3 seconds.
I'm pretty sure that the psychopath animal that was down at Virginia Tech, I think he had 8 clips, right? 8 clips. And actually went through them, and
so
it's
you don't
about
think
it's
we
about
make it
how
any more
quickly.
difficult for somebody to do a
I
spree
think what
killing?
we need to do when you have a psychopath animal like what happened in Connecticut, and they go from living a life to 26 murders the next day, unless you can find the crystal ball to figure out how that person's going to correct.
Keep trying here, Senator. Let me ask you the next one though. Armor-piercing bullets.
It depends how you
Oh,
define
come on. This isn't
armor-piercing.
tough. A bullet that can pierce a cop's body armor.
We disagree. I
But
want to go
why does that
after
need to be on the
criminals.
shelf of a store?
How about
no,
if
just
you?
as a simple one. Why does that need to be on the shelf of a store?
How about if you if you're a criminal and you commit a crime using an illegal firearm, we put your ass in prison for the rest of your life? How
Let me
about
try
that?
this. Do you think somebody should be able to own a bazooka?
How about that?
No. Okay, so you don't believe in a bazooka. Why do we believe somebody should be able to have an armor-piercing
The bazooka
bullet?
argument is always a good one for liberals like you.
It's not, Greg. It's not liberal. I'm trying to find if you have any line.
How about
you don't
this?
even want to
How about this, Richard?
Armor-piercing
No,
bullets.
you know,
I mean,
19 guys. You can grandstand all day long. 19 guys with box cutters killed 3,000 people.
I'm glad you asked that.
How about
All right,
let's get
background
rid of all the box cutters
perfect
and
argument.
planes and
Let's
crash
do-
the plane.
what do
Let's
we
get
do?
rid of
Should
planes.
we have done nothing? No.
40,000
Greg, time
people a
out.
year, Richard.
Time out.
40,000
Greg.
people a year killed in car crashes. Let's get rid of cars.
Time out. Your box cutter analogy. Should we have done nothing
More
after
people
9/11?
are killed with bats
No,
every
Greg,
year. A bat
should we
is
have done
the weapon of choice in violent crimes.
Please stop.
You don't
okay?
like that?
Wait. Do you
We
think
could
after
put everybody in a
9/11 we should have
plastic
done
bubble.
nothing?
Let's put everybody in a plastic
Greg,
bubble so they can't hurt
after
each other.
9/11, your box cutter analogy, should we have done nothing? Should we have not changed anything about airport security? Should we have not upgraded our terror watch list? Should we have not increased here intelligence to go get the bad guys?
We should do everything we can to go after criminals, to go after illegal firearms, and to be able to track and to deal with these violently, mentally ill
You
people.
don't want to do everything. 900
No, I
people have died in this
certainly
country
do.
at the end of a gun since Newtown.
And
you want to
let's
make
go
it
after the
all about...
criminals. Let's go after the criminals.
Okay, but the kid wasn't a criminal. Lanza wasn't a criminal before he walked into school.
He was a violently sick.
And he had access to AR-15s.
Hey, there you go. So these are questions of personal responsibility that your side don't want to talk about. You
I'm
roll
not
your
on
eyes.
a side
Is that-
here. Well,
is
how
that
about this? How about maybe we can agree on this one? A background check.
How about go back to your initial
a background check, Greg.
Let's go
Do you
back to
agree
the
in a background
psychopath.
check?
Let's go back to the psychopath in Connecticut.
Greg, with all due respect,
he was so violent that his mother told the babysitter, according to reports, "Don't turn your back on this kid for a second." And she takes him to a shooting range.
Okay,
he
I
has
got a
access
question
to
for you.
firearms.
Then how about that?
How about we
personal
take
responsibility?
How many people like
do
that?
Do you agree we should have trigger locks on guns when they're in households? Personal responsibility. That way she'll make sure the kid doesn't get it. How about this? Do you want to have smart guns where you can actually have personal identification right on the grip of the gun here so that a fingerprint would initialize
if you want
personal
If you want
responsibility?
somebody to agree with a comprehensive assault on the Second Amendment, have somebody else on your show. You can
No,
talk
I
about
gave
this
you
all
two
day long.
specific examples.
You can talk about it all day long.
Right.
My focus is go after the criminals, go after the crazy
Well, how about
people,
this? Background
and
checks.
go after the
Background
violently
checks.
mentally ill.
I know you had a big issue a few years ago, especially with some of the illegal immigrants that was coming to Guatemala in your district. Do you want to have a background check that nobody can walk into a gun show, that they're not a felon, that they don't have a domestic abuse complaint against them, that they don't have...
I believe that extensive criminal background checks are functional, do work.
40% of guns are not submitted to a background
I'll give you an
check.
example, okay?
No, Greg, 40% of guns are not subjected to a background
So I'll
check.
give you an example. I have a few shotguns in my house. If you decided to, to purchase one of those 12-gauge shotguns because I took you trap shooting and you like that, now the question is through a personal private transaction between two people, how do you gauge that through a criminal background check? So I support criminal background checks, and I think that we have to do better to tap into the national database to make sure people aren't falling through the cracks. But when it comes to private transactions between two people,
well, they made an exception, at least yesterday, was handing it down from family member to family member. There would be some exemptions here, but the idea of 2 out of every 5 guns right now, there's the gun show loophole. There's being able to buy a gun online without any background check. A guy on a terror watch list could get this and no questions asked. Finally, a database. And this, many people argue, will have more impact than even a ban on assault weapons. That every gun that's purchased, that there's a record of the buyer, and that every state mandatorily has to participate. Would you have a problem with that?
Right now, state by state and county by county, we do have a watch on transactions, and you've seen it in the state of New York with the semi-automatic rifles and the category of quote-unquote assault weapons, and certainly pistol permits as well. So I will say this, and so at least our perspective is taken. When we're starting to talk about registration in general, we know that it starts with registration, and it will lead to confiscation. And that's an opportunity for you to roll your eyes again, but that's something that we take very seriously.
Well,
and the focus, the entire focus.
I'm sorry, where has this gun grab happened that I don't know about?
Australia.
Okay,
it's
last time I checked, we're in America.
Right now,
but secondly,
right now, yeah, in America, and it's changing very, very quickly.
No, give me one example where there's been a gun grab where people have knocked down the doors and taken away the guns.
In the New York State, well, first, that's exactly what this governor wanted.
All right,
to
well,
start
let's talk
with,
about New York right after this, because we'll talk about what happened this week in New York, and also that issue, obviously, that has commanded a lot of attention, not just regionally, but nationally, over what the Journal News has decided to do. Greg Ball and I will be back right after this. Stay with us.